Hey, what's up guys? In today's video, we're going to have an in-depth look at RE4 on iPhone and iPad. I want to say a big thank you to Capcom for sending me an early access build of this game to review. Thank you so much, it really means the world to me. Anyway, hope you guys enjoy the video. Before we get into this, it's worth having a look at the supported devices for RE4, and you can see them on screen now. Yes, this version is also compatible with Mac, it's a universal app. Alright, now I want to have a look at the tech behind RE4 on iPhone and iPad. So this is a Metal 3 game, and it supports metal effects in the background. It also supports HDR, you can enable it within settings. Like RE Village, this is one of the first games to support HDR on iOS. I can't show HDR content in this video due to technical reasons, but trust me, it looks good. This game has iCloud backup. You have the ability to upload and download saved data via iCloud Drive on iPhone, iPad, and Mac. Local saves are also stored under the Files app. On Mac, you obviously have access to custom graphical options. However, unlike RE Village on iOS, RE4 on iOS doesn't allow you to access the graphics settings. VSync is enabled in the background. You can't change the resolution. You can't change the graphics preset or more advanced settings. And the frame rate is capped to 30 FPS on everything. You can only enable or disable HDR, lens distortion, depth of field, and motion blur. There is also no ray tracing support, same as on Mac. I don't think iPhone 15 Pro or an M series iPad is powerful enough for ray tracing anyway. Game file size with all content installed is 31.45GB compared to 65.99GB on Mac. Capcom probably used iOS texture compression algorithms to remove unused stuff on iOS. Possibly BCX, as RE4 only supports new devices. How do the visuals stack up for RE4 on iOS? First, what resolution does the game run at on my devices? iPhone 15 Pro is 1560 by 720. iPad Pro 11-inch M1 is 1600 by 1118. And iPad Air M1 is 1600 by 1112. And finally, my iPad Pro 12.9-inch M2 is 1920 by 1440. Metal effects is also being used on these devices, and I strongly believe it's spatial scaling. Remember, metal effects upscales a low-resolution image to a higher output resolution. Honestly, I kind of wish metal effects wasn't used on iPhone and iPad, as it makes the image quality blurry. You can also, when you're panning the camera with Leon, you can see this kind of halo type effect going on around him. I don't know what the correct term is, but that's just what I'm thinking in my head. All these devices look to be running at the same or very similar graphical settings. When comparing the M2 iPad Pro to an M2 MacBook Pro, the texture quality is significantly less on mobile. I'd say Capcom have gone down this locked-off visual approach with RE4 on iPhone and iPad to avoid thermal throttling, and, more importantly, running out of RAM at high settings, which can cause crashes. This was a massive issue in RE Village, especially on iPhone 15 Pro, with constant crashes if you played at too high settings. Still, I would argue that this game is still better looking than the majority of games on mobile. On iPad, the game doesn't take up the full screen real estate of their displays. Instead, it kind of plays at resolutions that are a 16:9 aspect ratio, so there are black bars at the top and bottom of the display. You can also see iPadOS icons at the top of the display for time, battery, date, percentage, Wi-Fi, etc. This shouldn't be here. It's very distracting. Also, a small thing, but cutscenes on iPhone 15 Pro run at a 16:9 aspect ratio, so there are black bars on the left and right of the screen. Not a big issue, but I thought I'd talk about it. Now let's have a look at the controls for RE4 on mobile. Touch controls. Same as RE Village, RE4 uses an on-screen controller for gameplay, and it sucks big time. It definitely seems like Capcom and Apple really don't want you to play with the controller, because it's so hard to play this game using this on-screen weird controller thing. The on-screen controller UI gets in the way of menu interaction, and it's just ugly, man. You can customize the controller layout, but overall, it still sucks. Now, what about controller support? The good news is that it has full controller support with rumble vibration. However, there is no DualSense support for triggers and haptic feedback like the PS5 version. This is the same case as the Mac version and is the same thing we saw with RE Village. So yeah, it plays really great with the controller, and I like playing it with my Backbone 1 controller with my iPhone 15 Pro. If you have an iPad and you have a stand, it's lovely like that. Or you can play on the couch and just relax and sit back. It's pretty good like that, yeah. What about mouse and keyboard support? Is it here for iPad? No. No, it's not. It's such a shame because iPads have supported keyboard and mouse for years now. It's even weirder that, this is a universal app with the Mac version, which obviously has mouse and keyboard support there. So shouldn't it just be easy to bring it over to iPad? I really don't get it. If you want, you can also play this game on an external display. So you can connect your iPhone or iPad to a monitor and play it using a controller for a more console experience. But still, is it really a console experience? Because you're playing at such a low resolution, which is then blown up. And there are black bars too, as it's just mirroring your iPhone or iPad display. And yes, while M1 and M2 iPads support full screen for external displays, RE4 doesn't enter full screen when connected to an external display on iPad. Now let's take a look at the performance of RE4 on iPhone and iPad. Before we get into this, it's worth noting Capcom have provided me with a test flight build of RE4, which allows me to utilize the Metal Performance HUD. Up first is the iPhone 15 Pro, powered by A17 Pro. As I said earlier, by default, the game runs at 1560 by 720, with metal effects enabled, a 30 FPS cap, and locked custom graphics applied by Capcom. There are a few scenes where it's a stable 30 FPS and the frame pacing is flat. I'll give it this, not many mobile games can achieve frame pacing like this, so good job for that. But there are equally as many scenes where the FPS goes well below 30. Getting headshots, timing a parry, or avoiding incoming enemy attacks is incredibly difficult when the performance struggles. I tried turning off lens distortion and motion blur to see if it improves performance in challenging scenes. In this scene, it does improve the frame pacing a bit. And during this battle, it can add maybe +1 to 3 FPS at times. Still, it's not really worth disabling these settings. I then tried low power mode, and this significantly hurt the performance. Low power mode is great for saving battery life on iPhone, and it can be ideal for simple mobile games. But this isn't a simple mobile game. Low power mode shouldn't provide extra performance. Low power mode puts the GPU and CPU to lower frequencies to save battery. Another massive issue on iPhone 15 Pro is when sniping. If you try to snipe enemies far away, the FPS most likely will tank below 20. This is probably because it has to draw a lot more of the world than when not sniping. If you're sniping enemies up close, for example, this issue is not as bad. I tried turning off lens distortion and motion blur, and the FPS only goes up about +1. There are definitely a few things not working in the iPhone 15 Pro's favour. It throttles. For me, it reached up to about 52 degrees. The other thing is battery life. I tested playing the game for 52 minutes and it lost about 50% battery. To save battery, you might consider playing on charge, but this is not a good idea, as charging emits heat from the battery, causing the iPhone to get even hotter. On charge, the FPS can drop even more, and cutscenes will often not be 30 FPS too. Maybe the A17 Pro GPU isn't powerful enough for the game too, or maybe Capcom need to optimize it better to achieve the 30 FPS target here. Up next are both my iPad Air 5th Gen and iPad Pro 11-inch 3rd Gen powered by Apple M1. As I said earlier, the game runs at 1600 by 1112 on my iPad Air and 1600 by 1118 on my iPad Pro 11-inch. Both have metal effects enabled, a 30 FPS cap, and locked custom graphics applied by Capcom. Unlike iPhone 15 Pro, the game is much more playable on these devices, as it mostly sticks to its 30 FPS target. Although I did see some challenging scenes that impacted performance. Here in Chapter 5, when defending the house with Lewis, it dropped to 27 FPS after I threw a grenade. Here in Chapter 10, inside the armory, it would drop to 27 FPS. Or here in Chapter 10 inside the ballroom, some more frame pacing issues are occurring, and the GPU is heavily used. I tried turning off lens distortion and motion blur to see if it improved performance. Inside the ballroom, it kind of does. Yeah, it does improve the frame pacing and GPU usage. Personally though, I'd still keep these settings enabled, as the game, for me anyway, looks better, and motion blur helps to make 30 FPS look smoother. Same with the iPhone 15 Pro, I found my iPad Air has a massive FPS issue when sniping. If you try to snipe enemies far away, the FPS will tank down to about 20 FPS. If you're sniping enemies up close, this issue should not occur. I tried turning off lens distortion and motion blur, but the FPS isn't really that different. Strangely, this issue did not occur on my iPad Pro with M1, so I can't confirm if all models have this issue. These devices don't get too hot for me either. Both didn't go over 40 degrees, and after playing the game for 1 hour, both lost about 45% battery. You can also play with a charger connected on M1 iPads, and it should not get as hot as iPhone 15 Pro, causing, those big FPS drops. Overall, the M1 iPad performance is mostly fine, but that stupid sniping FPS issue on my iPad Air makes the game unplayable on a regular basis. I hope in a future update a high performance mode for 60 FPS and a high graphics mode with 30 FPS can be added. M1 Mac performance, while not amazing, is definitely quite a bit better than M1 iPads. For example, here is a 13-inch MacBook Pro with M1 playing at 1600 by 1200 with VSync off, metal effects on performance, and lowest graphics possible. In some scenes, especially early on in the game when entering the village, the FPS can be higher than 60. However, later on in the game, it can often go below 60, especially during shooting sequences. And in some very challenging scenes, it's often about 30 FPS. It can maybe achieve a higher FPS overall because it has a fan and much better thermal management and better software for gaming. Our next device to look at is the iPad Pro 12.9-inch 6th Gen, powered by Apple M2. As I said earlier, the game runs at 1920 by 1440 with metal effects enabled, a 30 FPS cap, and locked custom graphics applied by Capcom.
That had to have done something.
Performance is mostly fine here. The higher resolution is much nicer too, especially on this 12.9-inch display. I only noticed some small micro stuttering in my gameplay. Some examples are during Chapter 7 in the water hall, and Chapter 10 inside the ballroom, with a few micro stuttering. Nothing of major concern, really. The sniping FPS issue is not apparent here too, which is wonderful. This device doesn't get too hot for me as well. It reached a max temperature of only 41 degrees, and after playing the game for 52 minutes, it went from 93% battery to 67% battery. You can also easily play with a charger connected on M2 iPad Pro, and it should not get as hot as iPhone 15 Pro, causing FPS drops. Overall, the M2 iPad Pro performance is acceptable. Again, I hope in the future a high performance mode for 60 FPS or even 40 FPS would be good, and a high graphics mode with 30 FPS can be added. M2 Mac performance, while not outstanding, is again much better than this iPad. For example, here is a 13-inch MacBook Pro with M2, playing at 1920 by 1200. VSync off, metal effects on performance, and lowest graphics possible. It's kind of similar to my M1 MacBook Pro. However, in some scenes, especially early on in the game, the FPS can be much higher than 60, which is good. But then, sadly, it's still more than often all the way down to 30 FPS during extremely challenging scenes. I will say again, this Mac can achieve a higher FPS overall, likely because it has a fan and much better thermal management, and the software included in macOS is miles better for gaming. So, what are we thinking of RE4 on iPhone and iPad? Are you impressed or disappointed? For me, the iPhone performance isn't very good, and that was kind of expected for me. But the iPad performance is acceptable, with some caveats here and there on the iPad Air. Overall, I'm really happy that this game is here, and what it stands for the Apple gaming ecosystem. AAA games, yeah! I also think that Capcom and Apple are in quite a good relationship at the moment. They love cuddling, and that's really good because I'm really hoping that we can see more games from Capcom come to Apple platforms. RE7 Remake, RE3 Remake, RE2 Remake, and all the other games outside of Resident Evil. And yeah, and personally, I love Resident Evil. It's one of my favorite franchises. So the fact that it's come to iPhone, iPad, and Mac and so forth is just really exciting. I'm very curious though, who is gonna buy this game? You know, like, are you gonna buy this game on your iPhone because it doesn't run very well there, but maybe you're gonna check it out because it's a good showcase of what AAA gaming could be on iPhone in the future? Or are you going to check it out on iPad because it's more there, a full console experience, and it plays fairly well? Or are you going to check it out on Mac where, you know, it might shine more? But at the end of the day, a lot of you probably already own this game on other platforms, so I'm just curious what you guys are thinking in the comments. And that's basically it. I want to say once again, thank you to Capcom for sending me an early access build of this game when I received that email. I was really excited. It took my breath away in many ways. It was lovely. So thank you so much for that. And I hope I wasn't too critical of you of this game, of the port in some ways, but I really do love the game. I really do. And yeah, I'm just so happy that this game is here because I just adore this game. I really do. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in another video. Yeah.